folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero August 2023 kit, both the classic and the premium. Of course, our kits come in these 8x10 zippered pouches. This month, we are going to Yosemite National Park. They are saying that this has been inspired by the owners of Hero Art's recent travel to Yosemite National Park. So let's dig in. This is the classic kit to begin with. We get a clear stamp set. This is a 4x6 stamp set with lots and lots of sentiments on it. Wishing you the best on your next adventure. Eureka, let nature be your medicine. Mountains of thanks. Cherish the little moments. Good luck. Take time to relax and enjoy. Then we get some dies. 4 Park Scene Fancy dies. So this is a granite cliffs and a meadow with little flowers. You can probably see that. There you go. A meadow with little flowers. Mountains. And then these really tall trees. That's a great die right there. You can see those tall trees here and here, the mountains and the granite cliffs. We get 1 sheet each of papaya, canary, palm, kiwi, woodland, and mist cardstock. These are 8.5 by 5.5. 1 sheet each, great colors. And we also get some brass embossing powder. Hero Arts brass embossing powder. And some Earth Safe gold glitter. This is the Hero Arts brand of Earth Safe biodegradable gold glitter. That's everything in our classic kit. Let's dig into the premium kit as well. Of course, with the premium kit, you get everything in the classic kit. And, oh, look at this, another stamp set. These are a poppy clear stamp set. This is 3 inches by 4 inches. And we also get poppy coordinating frame cuts. So these will cut out the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 little poppy stamps, 7 little poppy die cuts. And then we get some Hero Arts transfers this month. Cactus, look at those fun cactus. We get 4 sheets. 1, 2, 3, 4 of this fun cactus pattern. Cut them out, rub them on. Those are really adorable rub-ons. And last but not least, a bottle of the two-tone metallic sprays from Hero Arts. This is the spring green and gold. I think they're worried about running out of the green, so if you don't get the green, I think you get the yellow. Spring green and gold two-tone metallic spray. We've gotten one of these in our kit a few months ago. You fill it up with water, give it a shake up. It's a great two-tone spray. That's everything in our kit. We're going to California. California, here I come. And Yosemite National Park. Well, let's pack up the car and go. And here we have my 10 cards for the My Monthly Hero August of 2023 classic and premium kits. Got a couple of colored card bases here. Everything else is in white. As usual, I will try and make my first 5 cards using just the materials from the classic kit. Now that may be a little bit of an issue because all we've got are these stamps and these dies as far as images go. So unless we want to make a card with just sentiments, I guess we're going to have to work with these dies. So I took this cliff die and I took some Hero Arts watercolor cardstock. Now this isn't it, but I did use Hero Arts watercolor cardstock. I thought I'd be doing some watercoloring on this. I die cut the cliff die from that. And when I die cut that, I was kind of taken aback by how much white space there is down here. I know that we're supposed to, next, okay, you would add the meadow die on top of that, and then the trees on top of that. But then I started wondering if we could possibly get all of these layers cut on one panel of cardstock. Kind of like that. Everything just on one panel. I thought that would be an interesting way to take a look at this. So that's what I did for this very first card. And we have Mountains of Thanks card. This is all die cut from one panel. So this is all basically one layer. Okay, the sky is a different layer in the back there, but the mountains, the cliffs, the meadow, and the trees are all in one layer. So I did think that would probably be a little difficult to watercolor since this is all basically one layer. So I ink blended some soft granite ink on the cliff die, the Hero Arts grape slush reactive ink on the mountain piece, Hero Arts green apple reactive ink on the meadow, lightly, and that same green apple reactive ink on the trees, much heavier to get them darker. I stamped the sentiment using Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment ink, and I embossed that with some white embossing powder. So I ink blended some Hero Arts Splash Reactive ink on the top of a 4" by 5 1/4" panel of the same watercolor cardstock, and I glued the 4 blended die cuts down on top of that, trimming all of their edges to match as I went along. I added a little color to the flowers on the top of the meadow die using some colored gel pens. And I noticed that there were some few vertical lines of detail right here on this cliff piece. Is that a bit of a waterfall? Is that Yosemite Falls? I highlighted the falls with a little white gel pen, and I was quite surprised at how much depth that simple waterfall created on this assemblage. It does feel like we're coming over a hill with the cliffs of Yosemite in the distance. There's Yosemite Falls over there. Of course, the mountains aren't quite as huge as this in real life, but I figured this sentiment justified the big mountains. So here's our inlay die cut scene using all the Park Scene Fancy dies, and it's almost a one-layer card. Mountains of Thanks. So I did a little Yosemite research, and I found this picture that is so obviously the inspiration for these dies. I had to see if I could possibly bring a little more reality to our park scene, enough that someone would recognize it as actually being Yosemite. So for our next card here, we have Wishing You the Best on Your Next Adventure, a landscape card that looks terrifically like that picture. Again, I die cut everything from Hero Arts watercolor cardstock, and I used my Zig Clean Color real brush markers to watercolor everything. So the cliff die is simply cut apart in the center. Spread those apart. The meadow die is extended to 5 1/4" wide with partial die cutting, and I lopped off the random flowers on the top edge. The mountains are cut normally, and we're just using the right half of the tree die. Another light ink blending of Splash Reactive ink on a 4 by 5 1/4" panel of plain cardstock, then glued down to a white A2 card base. That's our sky. The mountains are then attached using thin foam tape. The meadow is glued to the cliff pieces, and those are all attached with thin foam tape as well. The sentiment is stamped on a scrap of white cardstock using Splash Reactive ink and then embossed with clear embossing powder and die cut with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. I think I had to do a little partial die cutting to get that to be just the right size. I mounted that with foam tape. This half of the trees is mounted with foam tape as well. This landscape orientation really expands the view here, and it also gives you a little more room on the side for those big sentiments. I think anyone familiar with Yosemite would recognize this scene. It's definitely a fussy card, but completely worth it. So I did paint that whole tree die for this, but cut the right-hand side away. I couldn't let that go to waste. Card number 3 is Let Nature Be Your Medicine. Can we see that? There we go. These leftover trees make a great focal point on this card. I die cut a piece of the palm cardstock in the kit to 4½ inches by 3¼ inches with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. I ink blended some root beer reactive ink on the bottom edge and blue raspberry reactive ink on the top. I think that gave us a little sense of ground and sky while still being on a plain colored background. I stamped the sentiment using Hero Arts embossing and watermark ink and embossed that with the brass embossing powder. For the mat, I cut out a piece of white cardstock to 4 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches. I inked the edges with embossing and watermark ink and embossed the brass embossing powder all the way around. That makes it a perfect match to that sentiment. I glued both of those to a white A2 card base. I trimmed the trees to fit and attached them with foam tape. Now, I was going to stamp the Get Well Soon sentiment on the inside, but I decided that let nature be your medicine didn't have to be of such limited scope. I really like these watercolor trees. Let nature be your medicine. Many parts are edible. Now, I don't think I have anything quite like this tree die in my stash. I have a variety of mountains and cliff dies, but no detailed tree clusters or forests. I really like that. I was fiddling around with that tree die when I realized you could divide the die cut apart at the lowest point, turning the trees into 2 clusters, and then move the left piece to the right side, and with just a tiny trim, create a whole different look. More of a single cluster of trees. That may be effective enough to create a second layer of apparently different trees in your forest, or maybe just to use on a big 5x7 or a slimline card. Of course, when I was playing with the tree die, I realized how easily you could make it longer with partial die cutting as well. So our next card is another landscape card, and we have Life is Beautiful. Oh, isn't that nice? We've gone to winter this time. Now you can see the tiniest little crease right there, which is where I did my partial die cutting. So these trees are the same as these two over here. I love that this whole piece got cut off right in the middle of that tree trunk on the right. This is all the way 4 1/4 by 5.5. The mountains are also extended with partial die cutting because that's our main die. That's the other side. So that big mountain is behind the trees there. Partial die cutting gave us a nice wide range of mountains, and they fit perfectly in those 2 spaces between our long die cut trees. These trees are cut from the watercolor cardstock, and the mountains are cut from some plain white cardstock. I ink blended Hero Arts Soft Sky, looking for even softer than the Splash Reactive ink. I ink blended Soft Sky on a white A2 card base. I ink blended the Hero Hues Thistle Reactive ink on the mountains, and I glued those to the card base. I stamped the sentiment using Thistle Reactive ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. I glued the trees directly on top since they're cut from watercolor paper. They're much thicker, don't need any foam tape behind those. This is a very soft, wintry scene up in the mountains, somewhere, nowhere specific. I really like these landscape cards. It's nice to know how adaptable these park scene fancy dies are. You know, I'm always trying to stretch our kit supplies to their fullest potential and really try to create something new for you and give you some new ideas. Okay, so enough with that tree die. I thought the meadow die was a little plain, kind of just a grassy border. So I started digging around in my embossing folder stash to see if I had any nature themes that might work with the meadow die. I came across this old Doris wildflower embossing folder. This is small. This is like 5.5 by 1 1/4 inches tall. That gave me the idea for this card, and we have Sending Smiles from Far Away. I ended up using that embossing folder not on the meadow, but on the cliffs. Nice nighttime scene here. Now, I dug out some old, this is Coordinations chalk core cardstock. Black on top, colored on the back. You can emboss on that, sand it, and it will bring up the color from the back. I almost forgot that I have this stuff, but I thought it'd be interesting to use with our die cuts. And of course, with that embossing folder. This pack is only 4x6, so that's going to dictate the width of my card panel. So I die cut the cliff die from the top third of the chalk core cardstock. You can actually see the yellow core in those cuts. I think that's great. I will have to remember that for nighttime cards with intricate dies. I embossed the folder on the bottom edge and lightly sanded it to bring out the core color. I did a little practice of that first on the top part that I cut away. I did do that embossing folder and just practiced a little bit of the sanding. Works really well. Very pleased with that. I stamped the sentiment using Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink, and I embossed that with white embossing powder. I cut a piece of white cardstock to 4 inches by 5.5, and I ink blended the sky with Hero Arts Red Reactive from one of our kits, Hero Hues Purple Galaxy Reactive ink, and Hero Hues Licorice Reactive ink. I spattered some stars in the sky using some lightly watered down white India ink, and when that was dry, I glued it to a white A2 card base. I glued the black panel on top and ta-da! I'm very pleased with this night scene. It's great to remember that I do have that color core cardstock in my stash. How interesting the cuts appear on that cardstock. You could easily lose the details of a die if you just use plain black cardstock. So I will use this color core cardstock more and more. Okay, I did it. That's a pretty good exploration of those 4 park scene fancy dies. Okay, let's break into the premium kit supplies now. First thing, of course, I did was grab that 2-tone spray, add some water to it. That's a great green, and the soft shimmers of gold really bring that color to life. I sprayed a couple of these watercolor cardstock panels with the spray. I wasn't trying to get perfect coverage, but I wasn't shooting for a splotchy look either, just a nice overall tonal gradation. And that gave us our card number 6, a good luck card. And we got some actual stamps in the premium kit. I stamped the poppy on more watercolor cardstock using intense black ink. I colored it with my Tombow watercolor markers and die cut it with the matching die. I do believe that California poppies are classically yellow. I cut one panel of the green gold cardstock to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches, and I embossed it with this Spellbinders 3D leafy embossing folder. I found this when I was digging through my embossing folders. Way too big to use on this card, but perfect for the background on that card. I love the 3D embossing folders. The gold really highlights the dimension on those leaves. It's just a nice little perfect touch. I glued that panel to a white A2 card base. I die cut another panel of the green gold with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die using partial die cutting again to give me a 2 1/4 by 3 inch panel. That matches the height of our poppy stamp. I stamped the sentiment with unicorn white ink, embossed it with white embossing powder, added a white mat to the back side, and attached those to the card front with foam tape, and I used the same tape for the poppy. Some gold pearls here adds a little more bling, and I did add some gold to the center of the poppies with a little gold gel pen. I don't think I've ever made a simple good luck card before, but green is a lucky color. Good luck. So it appears the Hero Arts community is going a little crazy for multimedia cards these days. There's even a new Facebook group, Mixed Media with Hero Arts, for all of the mixed media fans. I thought I'd jump on the bandwagon with this card, and we have Take Time to Relax and Enjoy. One of my favorite ways to tackle a mixed media project is to find a good background, and one of my favorite all-purpose multimedia backgrounds is Tim Holtz tissue wrap. This pattern is Postal, and it's just thin tissue paper with absolutely perfect multimedia backgrounds on them. There are, of course, lots of different patterns that Tim Holtz has these days. Of course, I ran a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel of plain beige cardstock through a Xyron sticker maker to cover one side with adhesive. Then it was easy to lay the adhesive side on the back of the tissue wrap. You can see through the tissue to right where you want to glue it, and attach the tissue and the cardstock together with no wrinkles. Of course, if you want wrinkles, you can add wrinkles. I grabbed the doodle stencil from the My Monthly Hero April of 23 kit and some Nouveau Citrus Green Embellishment Mousse. This green matches this green and gold spray like brilliantly, like perfectly. I was so surprised. And I used that embellishment mousse to add these little dashes on the side. You can see them over here, and these straight lines over here. Nice texture, a little more multimedia there. I lightly spritzed the green gold spray to get more of a splatter on parts of the background as well. I added some brown watercolor washes and spatters as well. I die cut the background with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I added a thin mat of the woodland cardstock, and I glued those down to a white card base. I stamped, colored, and cut the other poppies just like the poppy on this last card, and I stamped the sentiment on a scrap of white cardstock with intense black ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. Again, using partial die cutting. I don't have a Lawn Fawn die that actually fits that, but with partial die cutting, you can cut the top half of that, flip that around, cut the bottom half of that. Make almost any die exactly the size that you want. So that's actually 3 inches by 1 inch. I cut a scrap of white cardstock to 3 1/4 inches by 1 1/4 inches, and I glued the gold glitter to the edges with some score tape. I glued the sentiment, the glitter mat, and another thin woodland mask together and added those to the card front with foam tape. I added the die cut poppies with foam tape as well. I have 2 square brads up in the top right, a wooden butterfly. This is again embossed with the brass embossing powder. Glued that down left, and a good spattering of gold pearls adds more texture and shine and multimedia to this card. I added a bit of gold cord for the body of the butterfly and glued a small spray of gold thread to the bottom of the lower poppies here. They felt a little unmoored just floating there. Lots of gold, tons of shine on this card. This is my salute to the new Mixed Media with Hero Arts Facebook page. Take time to relax and enjoy. Now we can play with those cactus rub-ons. They are truly adorable, and there's a huge variety of them as well. My next card here is Cherish the Little Moments, featuring one little cactus there. I guess I was yearning for a little more simplicity after that multimedia card. So I die cut the papaya, canary, and woodland cardstock in the kit with a Spellbinders Add a Stripe of Color die. That just cuts 3 strips of cardstock. I did that on the edges of all 3 of those cardstocks from the kit, and I arranged those on the left of a panel of white cardstock that I cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I stamped the sentiment with root beer reactive ink and embossed it with some clear embossing powder. I added the barrel cactus to the rub-on over the sentiment and decided that I needed a little anchor, so I actually cut away the little stones on the bottom of this cactus, on the bottom right over here, cut them away, and then added them to the bottom of this barrel cactus. That's one of the great fun things with rub-ons. You don't have to use the whole rub-on. You can combine parts of rub-ons. You can use any part you like, most anywhere you'd like. Cherish the little moments. There are so many cacti on those rub-on sheets, and there's so many sheets, 4 sheets in our kit. I tell you, you could make a ton of just cactus cards with all these rub-ons, and heaven knows there are bunches of cactus puns out here. So my next card is Awesome People Stick Together. This one tickles my fancy. I lined up these 5 cacti rub-ons across the center of a 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel of white cardstock and printed the sentiment on that using my Silhouette software and the Bali Pagi 2 extra bold font. If you go to my website, there'll be a link to that font on my website as well. I glued that panel to a palm card base, added a white panel on the inside for a writing surface. Awesome People Stick Together. This one is dedicated to you. If you are watching this video, then you are awesome people as far as I'm concerned. Awesome people stick together. It's a nice little simple pun. So I think we've given this kit a pretty good run for its money by now. But I did have one more idea for, you're not going to be surprised, for that tree die. And here we have I Miss You looking up through the trees. When I was fiddling with the tree die cuts, I started cutting them apart and arranging them in a circle to see if I could create the illusion of looking up through the trees. I tell you, this almost makes me dizzy looking at it. I die cut 2 of the tree dies from thin black cardstock and 2 from some pearlescent green cardstock from my stash. I cut all of those trees apart, added the green behind the black as a bit of a shadow. Now note also that these 2 trees right here at 6 o'clock and like 8 o'clock, those trees are actually from the negative part of the cut. There's that tree right there. You can see that. So there you go. I used 2 more of those from the negative side. This is a pretty good tree over here from the negative side too. You could make your own forest with this, I'm telling you. So then I covered a panel of white cardstock with some Altenew watercolor nebula wide washi tape. This is my go-to if I need a galaxy or a nebula. And if I'm not in the mood to create my own, then I go to this washi tape. It's like almost always on back order or sold out on the Altenew website, but this is great fun. I put some of that on a white card base, and I cut an oval from that from Hero Arts Infinity Nesting Oval die. I arranged the trees around the oval, glued them down, and trimmed the edges to match. I cut 2 oval frames from some pitch black cardstock using 2 of the oval dies, and I glued them together. So I stamped the sentiment on a pitch black card base with the unicorn white pigment ink and embossed that with white embossing powder. I glued the oval to the card base and glued the frame around the oval. I like the slight difference between the black cardstocks on this card. The trees are a little flatter, not quite as black as that pitch black cardstock. I think the oval frame provides a great finishing touch. Another nighttime card enhanced with that beautifully colorful washi tape. I miss you. Don't get dizzy, looking straight up. There you have it. 10 cards using the My Monthly Hero August 2023 Classic and Premium kits. I did find this month's kit a bit of a challenge. Now, I tend to get my kits a little earlier than regular subscribers, but well after the design team has gotten their kits. So since you get to see all of the sneak peeks and the design inspiration from the design team when the kits are released, I try my hardest to go beyond those initial inspirations to give you some other ideas and introduce possible new ways of thinking about and creating with your kits. This kit made my brain hurt a little, just a little. So regardless of my personal struggles, we actually have a nice wide variety of cards this month. I really enjoyed trying to make these park scene fancy dice look as much like Yosemite as I could. I enjoyed expanding those portrait dies to fit onto a landscape card. And though multimedia may not be my go-to technique, I had fun making my little multimedia card. And of course, Those cactus rub-ons are totally charming. While I did use a little bit of everything in this kit, I didn't quite use all of the stamps and dies this month. Heavens, there are 13 sentiments on this stamp set by itself. I thought I was doing really good just to find a place to use that gold earth safe glitter. I have a good amount of cardstocks left, though I did use many of the cardstocks. I did stamp the poppy stamps on some black cardstock and watercolored those with some pearlescent paints. That came out nice, but didn't really excite me very much. And I did, of course, practice cutting out that cliff die using partial die cutting, and it actually gave me a big, huge, long, that's almost 8.5 inches wide, I guess. I'll hang on to that. That's useful on some kind of a card. So both the classic and the premium kits are still available at Hero Arts. If I manage to catch your eye or imagination, or you're just a California or Yosemite junkie and you'd like to grab a kit for yourself, please use my links in the description down below. It is always supremely appreciated, and it truly helps support this page. Thank you so much. I did note this month, and I don't know if this is regular, that the full August release has an option to purchase just the premium elements from this month's kit, which that includes the poppy stamps and dies, the two-tone spray, and the cactus rub-ons. It's actually cheaper than the classic kit. So if you just like the premium supplies, you don't have to purchase the classic supplies as well. I love that. I haven't noticed that option before. So there's an idea for you, especially if you're dying to get your hands on those cactus rub-ons. Thank you so very much for sharing your time with me here. I do think you are all awesome people. Please take a moment to let me know what cards are your favorites. And remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all of your crafty friends and enemies. Don't run with scissors. As always, I send you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.